In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness there is no God but Allah, who came to us in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom praise is due forever. We thank him for raising in our midst the promised Messiah and predicted Christ, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We thank them both for our leader, teacher, and guide, the apostle and servant of Allah and his Christ, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. And in those names, I greet my brothers and sisters in the words of peace in the original tongue of our fathers of Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank Brother Fontaine and Brother Shahid and all of the laborers and staff here at Mosque Mariam. Above all, I want to thank the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, my teacher as well as my leader, for giving me something of value to have to say to my people. It is a very delicate project to come before black people in 1993, because in coming before you, one always runs the risk of telling you things that you already know because of the high level of consciousness and awareness that is among our people today. And I must say, particularly that elect group of people who chooses to spend time engaged in listening to a word that is not generally accepted by the institutional base of white America. And nevertheless, there is something in you that causes you to seek after that word, even though in many instances you encounter opposition just in the effort to come here and hear a lecture. Today's lecture is, hopefully by the will of Allah, going to comprise part one of a series entitled Your Creative Force. And of course, very important in that title is the word your, not generalities, but you as a specific, individually created person whom Allah gave a unique purpose during your time on this earth. Part one is entitled Beginnings. One of the 99 attributes of Allah is Creator. Creator. In fact, in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we find that the attribute Creator is first in the order of all the 99 attributes. He, Allah, God, is the Supreme One who brought all that is into being. He is the author of all that exists, and He is the maker of the laws which govern and sustain that which He has caused to come into being. Now, the word create, to cause to come into being something unique that would not naturally evolve, or that is not made by ordinary processes to cause to happen. In other words, beloved, in His attribute Creator, Allah has the capacity to bring about things that would not simply come by the passage of time. And this is the attribute that each of us possesses to some degree, that we are allowing to remain dormant. And all too frequently, as a people, we have a tendency to wait for things to come about and to hope that with the passage of time, deficiencies in the environment and in our lives will correct themselves. Now, that is true of some things, but it is not true of everything. The triple darkness that Allah created himself out of was destined to remain as it was eternally. The life that you are and the life around us would not have evolved had it not been moved upon by a force. And that force is present today in you and I. And by force, of course, we mean strength, energy, power, and intensity. Now, to be creative, and I'm bringing this definition from the Psychic Encyclopedic Dictionary, which defines creative as pertaining to a non-thought, evolving through one's conscious mind, bringing a new idea from a higher source than that person's normal intellect could bring into being. Psychic information that comes through the superconscious mind directly from the originator. Creativity, then, is not something that you acquire in the traditional educational system. It is something that transcends scholastic or intellectual knowledge. It is something that comes as a result of you and I accessing our connection with the originator. Now, the question is, how do we actuate our creative power? And we want to start with our beginnings as an individual person. And we can't do that unless we're willing to probe our memories. Before I get into that, I want to read to you from the 32nd surah of the Holy Quran. That surah is entitled Al-Sajda, the Adoration, and it is taken from the 15th verse of itself, where the faithful are spoken of as falling down in adoration when divine messages are recited. And I just want to read a few verses. I want to start with verse 4 and read to verse 9. Allah is He who created the heavens and the earth and what is between them in 6 periods. And He is established on the throne of power. You have not besides Him an intercessor or guardian. Will you not then mind? He orders the affair from the heaven to the earth. Then it will ascend to Him in a day the measure of which is 1,000 years as you count. Such is the knower of the unseen and the seen, the mighty, the merciful, who made beautiful everything that He created. And He began the creation of man from dust. Then He made His progeny of an extract of worthless water. Then He made him complete and breathed into him of His Spirit and gave you ears and eyes and heart. Little is it that you give thanks. Now, let us think as individuals back to where we began on this plane of existence. Memory is a word that comes from a Greek term meaning to care for. All of our previous experiences are meant to be cared for. That is, beloved, use your past experiences, good and bad, to grow closer to God. Do not hide your experiences from yourself. the Honorable Louis Farrakhan says, life is recognition of God at the moment. This means that if you can recognize God right in this instant, you are alive, and regardless to what burdens you are carrying and what things you have done in life that you regret, God has seen fit to bring you to this moment and has favored you with the capability to recognize Him. Meaning, you know He has complete power to give you what your heart desires. Now, behavioral scientists tell us it is easier to accept information that your parents learned than it is to learn new information. This is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad encountered such incredible difficulty in moving the teachings that he received from Master Farad Muhammad, because it was easier for our people to accept pork in the diet, to follow the practice of observing Christmas and Easter, to be a servant to Caucasian people. Why? Because this was what their parents had done before them. What God has done in this generation, under the leadership of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, is break the genetic and generational bond to slavery. This is why the black youth is deemed not only by Caucasians but by old-minded Negroes to be hostile, incorrigible, and impossible to deal with, to the point that even old-minded Negroes call in the Caucasian armed forces in the person of local police to actually kill, maim, and imprison our own offspring, because they are no longer a reflection of what has been genetically programmed into a slave mentality, and that is the inclination to bow to people simply because their skin is white, and for no rational basis. All praise is due to Allah. When the Honorable Louis Farrakhan spoke to us Wednesday night, he talked about the new generation as a new life. And of course, when life is in its beginnings, it is not pleasant to observe. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan referred to a blood clot. And if you have ever seen one, it is by no means a pleasant sight. But its beauty is not in what it is. Its beauty is in what God has ordained that it is to become. These youth who are so ugly on the surface in their rebellion against the institutions that we have come to serve and worship are in fact ripe and ready to process new information that is being given to us by Almighty God Allah through the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. In 1987, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan began a series entitled How to Give Birth to a God. And in the process of teaching, he took us with him on a personal journey. And that is what I wish to impart to you today. The leader took a journey back into his mother's womb. He did it to resolve certain conflicts within himself. Now, certainly, having been instructed by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to follow this man, There are times when the instructions to follow the Honorable Louis Farrakhan aren't always just on the physical, but sometimes that is making reference to the metaphysical and the spiritual plane. The man that we see before us is certainly physically beautiful, intellectually brilliant, and an example of how to behave socially in civilization. But behind the physical example, he is also before us as an example of the path back to the origins of self to help us resolve internal conflicts that are preventing us from being the best that we can be. And certainly it's not a mandate that you privately embark on a journey to your mother's womb. However, when you read the Holy Quran and its constant references to our beginning as a sperm mixed with ovum, and then warns us to reflect and be mindful, then God gives us a man that tells us he underwent that experience, then certainly we might consider following the same path. And it's a very, very private matter. Study guide number 2 in the self-improvement course given to us by the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is entitled Building Human Potential. And of course, in order to build, you must have a foundation. Step 1 of that foundation is to accept the truth that each of us possesses the potential to be infinitely more powerful than we currently are. We know, beloved, we are nowhere near what we are capable of being. Jesus said, "As a man thinketh, so is he." Now, are we really paying attention to that statement? Look at this again. As a man thinketh, so is he. We tend to interpret that statement to mean, as a man thinks he is, so is he. You see, we are not what we think we are. We are what we think. And the question is, do we really know what we are thinking? Do you follow what I'm saying? See, there's what we think we are, and then there's what we really are. Our perception of what we are thinking and what we actually are thinking is not necessarily the same. In fact, in all probability, it is not. From the moment of conception, and everybody in this room was conceived. Nobody floated in here. And I'll tell you something else. No one in here was picked up out of a garbage can. I don't care what the circumstances were surrounding your birth. You were planned, not necessarily by your mother and father, but you were planned by the originator. And that's all that counts. Now, from the moment of that conception, all the way through the 9 months until your physical birth, you developed, and I developed, through the most complex system of creative intelligence that exists in the entire universe. The sperm, regardless of the state of the individual that it comes forth from, is a divine force. The ovum, despite the current state of the individual in whom the ovum resides, is divine. And conception itself, regardless of the state of mind of the two persons involved, is completely filled with the presence of the Creator. Struggle is ordained, isn't it? And if you are a believer in God, whether you say I'm Christian, Muslim, Hebrew. I'm not any religion. I'm just spiritual. I don't need to tell you who ordained struggle, do I? Who ordained struggle? Don't be afraid. God, Allah, Jehovah ordained it. So if he ordained it, it has a good purpose. Struggle, or in Islam, jihad, is what produces power. Our weaknesses are a gift from God, just as our strengths. For it is in overcoming weakness that we know and apply the creative force. At some point, beloved, if you are serious about growing to the complete fullness of divine power, and I believe that you are, otherwise you would not have come to hear the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the direction of Minister Louis Farrakhan. At some point, we all must confront our own physical beginning. Take comfort in the knowledge that rarely, if ever, is there a perfectly balanced harmony between the union of egg and sperm. Whatever the dynamics of each of our individual conception was, it is reverberating throughout our lives. It's affecting everything we do. Therefore, it is of immeasurable value to try and find out the circumstances surrounding your conception. Many of us don't even know what the circumstances were surrounding our conception. Where was your mother? How old was she? Who did she live with? What were her emotional feelings at the time? What was her financial condition? What was her belief? Where was your father? What was his thinking at the time? What type of pressures was he under? Emotional balance of each parent and their feelings about parenthood and their feelings toward one another affects us. And by the way, a growing fetus in the womb cannot distinguish the feelings that its mother has towards others from the feelings that she has towards it. Okay? Whatever mother is feeling while pregnant, the baby growing inside tends to take these feelings personally. When you are on this journey, some of you may find just attempting to locate the truth is painful. You may go to your mother. Well, what were you doing when you were having me? She doesn't even want to talk about it. But if she's not a good source, ask someone else who was around at the time. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan said his mother was very limited in what she had to say about the birth. He spoke with his uncle, who added and gave him some more information. You know, what a woman goes through, she may not want to discuss it. And we don't live in a society that really understands the sanctity of pregnancy and does not encourage the pregnant woman to be in touch with her feelings. Pregnancy is generally deemed something that is either socially acceptable or not acceptable at the moment. All anybody cares about is she married, does she have the money, and those are the only considerations. Not the idea that this is divinely ordained regardless of the immediate circumstances of those two individuals. I'm just saying, attempting to even find out what was going on when we were born might be painful, but knowledge is power. And to know the truth is to aid in the development of your own creative force. When you are with God, it is always good. God told Jeremiah, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. So this means that your existence transcends the condition of your parents. See, God knew you. So if he knew you first then you are not a result of their planning. You are a result of his planning. If they are happy about his plan, that's fine. But if they are not, all praise is due to Allah, because the only mind that counts is God's. And God desired for you to be here. Now, the first few, all praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah. Let's go back now to the first few weeks of life. And I don't mean the first few weeks after you were physically delivered. The first few weeks after the egg and the sperm met. What were you experiencing then? That phase of our lives was probably quite pleasurable for the very thing I just stated. Because probably the only two who knew of you were the Creator and yourself. No one else really knew that you were there. And the conception and even the first initial journey down through the fallopian tubes was probably good. Just you and God. Even if you were an unwanted pregnancy, there was a point at the very initial stages of your life when you knew you were deeply, deeply desired. Because not only did the Creator want you, but look how many trillions of years he waited for you to come into existence. Because you were not just planned. He didn't just come up with an idea of you in those 9 months. You were planned at the very time he came into being himself and decided that he wanted a universe filled with persons who were reflections of himself. All the way back trillions and trillions of years ago, he desired you. However, there came a time when implantation took place. And you can go back into the lectures of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan on giving birth to a God, where he talks about implantation. This is when the fertilized egg makes contact with the uteral lining. Now, this is where problems might begin. Because this is when you first connect physically with mother. And if she does not want to be pregnant, this is your first trauma. Minister Farrakhan explained to us that the first attachment we experience as a fertilized egg clinging to the wall of the uterus is where our first need arises in life. The first thing we need ever is to be made secure. It's the most important thing to us in the world, is to feel a sense of security. Now, and lose touch with what is called a miscarriage. Or, even worse, are sucked out by what is called abortion. So no matter what your mother thought of you, she carried you to term. Even if she went and tried to get rid of you, ultimately she carried you to term. And she went to hell and back to deliver you. Whether she did it willingly or unwillingly, she served as an agent of the Creator and brought you here. Now, when we first go into this implantation phase, think back. What was it like for you? And you say, are you crazy, Sister Ava? I don't even know it. I don't even remember when I was 5. What are you talking about? You're tripping. But there is a part of you that remembers this very well in every minute detail. Going back to the definition of the word memory, to care for. Every experience you had is stored somewhere in the subconscious. And all I'm saying, if you want to go and get it, it's there for you. The Honorable Louis Farrakhan proved it. However, if you choose not to do this, that is also up to you. But I am just trying to open up some of the deeper aspects of the self-improvement course to show you self-improvement is not just grooming, but self-improvement is also the process of healing open wounds within our tissue cells that are affecting our happiness. Now, what were the conditions of your mother's womb? The white man likes to say uterus. And that's true, since that's what he assigned. But you know why he likes to use the word uterus instead of womb? Imagine a young black woman going into Cook County with menstrual cramps. And a white doctor says to her, I can end those problems for you, lady. All we have to do is remove the uterus. She's 19, 20 years old, never reads, watches BET all the time. Just a quick outpatient, it'll be done in a half an hour. Then not only will you be relieved of cramps, you can have a free sex life. You don't have to worry about anything. You're young, you should enjoy your life. You shouldn't be burdened with this type of suffering every month. Who needs it? I can eliminate that for you. And so he performs a hysterectomy. But if he said to this young girl, let me take your womb away, I don't care how so-called illiterate she is, now you're touching something in the divine essence of my womb. Jesus was born in the womb of Mary. See, all through the Bible and the Holy Quran, we talk about Abraham in the womb of his mother. We talk about Moses in the womb of his mother, Solomon and David and Jesus and Muhammad, all being carried in the womb of their mother. Not the uterus, the womb. All praise is due to Allah. The Quran says reverence what? The womb. Because it is the laboratory of the Creator where gods are produced. Now what if you go into this womb? As a new fertilized egg, you should be made welcome. That lining should be like a luxurious red velvet sofa that you can just stretch out and relax and lay on and start nourishing. Yeah, I'm going to be ready in about 9 months. Meantime, I'll just chill out a little bit. What if there's fibroids in that womb? Now you've got to find space. Some of us to this day have an inordinate need for space. And we don't know why we're like that. But whatever went on in there, you're affected by it. Some of us are born from wombs where there was an attempt to abort and we survived it. Not only once or twice, but 3 or 4 times. This means you are somebody strong, to use an understatement. See, you're born for war. You're born for revolution. You are determined to fulfill your destiny. You know, most of us know people who will never ask for directions. You know people like that? They would rather get lost and be late for the appointment than ask somebody for some direction. The Caucasian researchers say this might relate to a primal feeling of ambivalence in the fertilized egg about reaching its destination. What if your mother hid her pregnancy with girdles, resulting in feelings of constriction? She didn't realize the pain that it was causing you, or that because she was wearing tight clothing and holding her stomach in because she feared condemnation from a hypocritical society, because she was pregnant and didn't have a husband, or pregnant and didn't have the right financial condition. She didn't realize that because she acted like she wasn't pregnant, it made you feel like you didn't exist, that it took enormous energy for you to grow each cell, because instead of basking in the glory of her pregnancy, she hid it. I have observed, and I know you have too, relationships between women and children where the older child, or even as an adult child, the child, when he or she grows up, rejects the mother's efforts to demonstrate love and affection. And this leaves many women bewildered. They don't understand why this child, they may say, well, I know I didn't want to be pregnant. I know I was a certain way during infancy, but I want to make up for it, you see. Now I want to do things, but the child is hostile and really doesn't want to establish the relationship. What all of us must consider, sisters, is that our reaction to the news of our pregnancy is a significant marker for the child's future self-esteem. From the fetal point of view, the new life point of view, it makes the new baby feel like someone who was invited to dinner, then when he arrives, he's asked to leave. What do I mean by that? Well, in the act that produced the child, the sexual intercourse, there is great ecstasy and joy. And it is an invitation to life. And in response to the joyous union of two people, life comes into being. Now life is present and it's rejected. So it is like being invited someplace and you get there and you're told, really don't want you here. Go back where you came from. Since it is natural to want to be a mother, and since we are placed here to reproduce, then negative feelings about a pregnancy are not really aimed at the child. It's really negative feelings, and I can't stress this enough, that society puts on the woman over certain obligations she feels have to be met in order for her to be pregnant. Sometimes she's upset because she's not married. Sometimes she's upset because she is married, but not happily. Sometimes it is not a financially good time. Sometimes she may have had too many pregnancies in a row. It could be all sorts of reasons. But the baby growing inside takes these feelings personally. And again, black youth are considered hostile. But when you have experienced rejection from the very beginning of life, how do you feel as an adult if you did not feel wanted as a young baby? Now, to drive this point home, and what I'm really saying today is this. In Islam, as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we celebrate life. At a time when the enemy is trying his best to limit our population and is encouraging the termination of life, and at the same time pushing us into conditions where new life is really extremely difficult for us. We have to look beyond society and make contact with the Creator and what the Creator wants. Now, if you are a woman and you have just discovered you are pregnant and everything in your life militates against the completion of this pregnancy, I say this to you. I say to you, study the life of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I say to you, beloved, that the circumstances surrounding her pregnancy were terrible, and she suffered greatly. And whether you read about her in the Bible or the Holy Quran, and I would suggest you do both, you will see that Mary suffered from social condemnation and in fact had to flee from her home because under the laws of Islam, her pregnancy was a violation of the restrictive law because she was not married to the father. And had her pregnancy come to the attention of the officials, both of them, she and the father, Joseph, would have been executed. So the pregnancy and the birth were quite traumatic, and yet look who came. as a result of that pregnancy because it was carried to term. But I want to speak on something very real to the black community, and I really want to say this in an audience of men and women, because too often, brothers, you are so detached from the new life that you are producing that it denies you access to the most real source of power that you have. And that is your ability to give life and to bring human beings into the world that can change this environment into the way that it should be. That's where the real power is. And the enemy has been unsuccessful in stripping you of that power. It is not money, it is not political stature, it is the ability to produce a human being. I want to speak, and then I'm going to close, on cesarean section. This is a very delicate topic, but it must be addressed. Do not take this topic personally, because what I'm going to say about it is not a judgment on the correctness of this procedure in an individual case. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because everything is different for every individual. However, we must enlighten our people to the consequences of this procedure and the frequency with which it is performed, as well as the motive of the medical profession in performing it so frequently. In 1960, 1 out of every 20 babies was born by cesarean section. Now, 1 out of every 4 is born by cesarean section. And remember, struggle is ordained. Birth is a powerful imprint. It is not just physical, it is spiritual. God designed the birth process for a reason. When that process is interfered with, it should be only after careful thought, and it should be justifiable. So often we hear the Honorable Louis Farrakhan compare labor and birth with death and resurrection. And you hear the women bear him witness, those who have become mothers. I have not become a mother as of yet. And if I never become one, I'm still going to tell you about this, because it is the truth. And I stress again, it is not to criticize any action anyone has taken or may have to take because of specific circumstances. But at the same time, I don't want you to just blindly do things because it is, quote, the thing to do, and, quote, everybody is doing it, without any other information but that. A cesarean section, because I see some people like, what is it? Which proves my point that it needs to be discussed. There's this surgical removal, brothers, of the baby from the mother. It is where the doctor makes an incision and goes into the mother and takes the baby out. It sets up entirely different dynamics from the vaginal birth, where the baby is required to push its way into life in this world. A period of labor produces hormonal changes and physical stimuli that physiologically, psychologically, and emotionally prepare that baby's system to go from a water world to a land world. See, you have to understand the trauma. If you've ever been fishing and you snatch one of those fish out of that water, he is in panic sitting Because you have removed him from an entirely different universe. We don't begin looking like we look now sitting in these chairs, sophisticated and attractive and beautiful. We start out as a fish, swimming in a bag of water, a big round head with tail. We look like a tadpole. We're ugly when we start out. But we start out in a water world. We don't even know how to breathe air when we are first born. So the God has set in place a process to make that transition called the birth canal. In the vaginal delivery, and I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. There's a whole list of these examples. The amniotic fluid is squeezed out of the baby's chest as she or he fights their way down through that birth canal. Now, if you snatch the child out of the stomach and don't allow that baby to fight that fight, then you're going to bring him out. He's still got all this fluid in his chest. Now you've got to do something called suction. You got to suck the fluid. This subjects the baby to a trauma that's not in the scheme of things. The child experiences a lack of oxygen from being lifted up above his blood supply. As a result, the doctors and the nurses, people, we don't even know these people. Who are these people? They snatch the baby away from the mother and say, we've got to keep her under observation for 24 hours. So in the very first moments of life, when it is critical that the baby be embraced by the woman that just suffered to bring that baby forth, that feels about that baby like no other person but God feels. And he's taken down a hallway somewhere, put in an incubator, actually a glass coffin. And for 24 hours, some white man, some white woman, some self-hating Negro is the overseer for this new life. This cannot be. And all praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Allah intended, beloved, for us to come here fighting, pushing our way out. The shape of the head is made in the birth canal. You are born to be a fighter, not for someone to break in. In study guide number 4, The Struggle for Balance, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan describes the little bird coming into existence. If I ask you the number one purpose of a bird, or the number one function that a bird is known for, what would you tell me it is? To fly. To fly. Well, before the bird can fly, God forces that bird to stand up as a prerequisite to qualify to fly. How can you be given the power? Don't you wish you could fly? That's awesome. To be able to just get up off the ground and leave. I got to call O'Hare, talk to some enemy at American Airlines, pay hundreds of dollars, go when they say go, hope they don't crash with me in it. But look at the bird. He can just get up. Well, he didn't just come out like that. He had to earn his way. He had to stand up. How did he get the power to stand up? Because when he's in that egg, nobody cracks the egg and opens the egg and snatches him out. He has to peck his way out of that egg. And as he pecks and pecks, he develops strength in his little bird legs. And by the time he comes out, he says, yeah, I'm a bird. I'm ready. I exist. Then he stands, and then he flaps, and then he's out of here. All praise is due to Allah. I heard the Honorable Louis Farrakhan say with sadness, he said, and he is a father and a grandfather. And he said of the birth of one of his grandchildren, he said, my son followed the law of nature. And as a result of the law of nature, his wife gave birth. He said, what I don't understand is why does it cost thousands of dollars and hospitalization as a result of following natural law? 100 years ago, you were not hospitalized. And again, please do not take this wrong. And don't take it to say, well, Sister Ava said we shouldn't go in the hospital, and because there are all sorts of complex factors that work into every individual case. This is not that. I'm really speaking of a state of mind we need to get in for the future. We've got all these little girls and all these young sons that know nothing about this. And they can be taught and trained in a way so that we can wean them off of dependence on the white man's institutions. That's what I'm talking about. I don't want you to get crazy and become a happy jack and run around snatching black women out the hospital and this type of thing. But I am telling you, brother, if a woman is carrying your child, I don't care if you are married or not, I don't care how you feel about her, you need to be present when that child is born. There need to be friends there, people to supervise, people to check out what is going on. Even white people are ending up taking the wrong child home. You saw that TV movie, didn't you? Switched at birth. They take the child out for a feeding and bring something else back. And if you study the origins of the Caucasian race, that's how they came into being. Was the separation of the new baby from the mother, and something else was brought back. That's another story. But you can learn that by coming into the fold of the teaching. But my point is this. I am simply suggesting that, sister, you don't just let some doctor tell you, well, you've been in labor too long. How long is too long? Long is how long it takes. Every baby is different. But maybe this doctor has a golf game. All right? This is the truth. Now, this has happened. This has happened. As Allah's my witness. They got something else they got to do. You've been in labor too long. Get that thing out of her so that I can go on to my next appointment. I've got a plane to catch. I'm on my way to Nassau, Bahamas for a vacation. This is the truth. Also, you have to understand this. The money in medicine is where? In what? I heard it. Surgery, right? Doctor doesn't make any money telling you go drink some black co-host tea and you'll be all right. He doesn't make money for that. He makes money with that knife. And that is why the first recommendation a black person is going to have made to them, whatever is ailing you, is to be cut up. That's what they're going to suggest to you. And I'm saying that the money in obstetrics is in the cesarean. That is why there was 1 out of 20 in 1960, and now there's 1 out of 4. And in an ailing economy, you are going to see even a more rapid increase. 100 years ago and more, we didn't consider pregnancy an illness where you have to be treated for it by a doctor. But once the enemy found a way to make a profit from that, he also supplied us with the reason we should be totally dependent upon him. I will say this on closing on that point. Where a cesarean is necessary, what you must do is take care in selecting your doctor. Because a baby born like that must be handled with much more awareness and sensitivity. Make sure that that baby's first touch experience, and if it involves having to suction that child, make sure it is done gently as a form of spiritual and emotional support to replace the loss of some of the wholeness and integrity and the coherence of sensations provided coming through the birth canal. In other words, you can make up through what you supply that child with in emotional support for what did not happen in the physical world. Our individual progress, beloved, depends on the intensity of our desire. We must accept that study guide number 3 tells us the difficulty factor. When we turn away from difficulty, we let trials extinguish the light of our desire. You want to be a doctor. As soon as you hear about how many years are involved, I change my mind. I don't want it. You want to speak the truth. But if it threatens a job or a paycheck, we're quiet. Some of us spend our time on earth living in a fantasy world of soap operas and romance novels, watching movies, fooling our brain into thinking we are having excellent adventures. Because the brain cannot distinguish between what you think you're doing and what you're really doing. So when you see Die Hard and you see Bruce Willis up on the screen and he's jamming and he's shooting terrorists and you're imagining that you're doing this, the brain actually thinks you did these things and it's satiated. Then it becomes sufficient to spend life as a couch potato, smoking marijuana and talking about how good life is. Some of us wait for the lottery number to come up. Or we play Wheel of Fortune from the couch, winning grand prizes every night, but never leaving the projects. This is the truth. This is us. There are many ways to suppress the creative force. That's the point. To keep desire from nourishing the will. There is only one way to reach our destiny, to fulfill the purpose for which we are created, and that is to struggle. Through deep humility, heartbreak, and tears, remember that every sorrow opens the doorway of progress. When we grow bitter in our trials, we are actually closing the door of opportunity. And he who receiveth all things with thankfulness shall be made glorious, and the things of this earth shall be added unto him, even an hundredfold, yea, more. Black people, we have suffered greatly at the hands of our enemies. Let us use that suffering to pay the price for our redemption. I call this series, and this has been part 1, Your Creative Force, because the Creator gave every one of us a glorious individual pattern. No two people are identical, even identical twins. No two lives are exactly alike. Yet each life holds a great destiny, rich in achievement and honor. As we live according to the examples given by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, we can grow in greatness. No one and no thing can keep you from reaching your goal if you will submit to do the will of God. No one can live your life for you, for only you have the key to your fulfillment. Beloved, listen to the self-accusing spirit. Do as Master Farad Muhammad, to whom all holy praises are due forever, has told us to do. Accept your own and be yourself. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. All praise is due to Allah. Thank you so much.